Welcome to My Movie Story. I'm your host, Brian McAleer. This is the podcast where we dive into the movies that have shaped us. Each episode, we sit down with a special guest to discuss their all-time favourite film, the movie that changed their life, and the one film they think everyone needs to see. Get ready as we journey through the cinematic worlds that make us who we are. This is My Movie Story. My guest today is Rebecca Thomas. For more than 20 years, Rebecca has been helping people break through obstacles that seem to be holding them back in life. With her high energy, contagious confidence, and natural ability to lead, she's been teaching women how to show up for themselves in big, unapologetic ways. Her clients reclaim their power, live intentionally, and do so their way, making their own rules as they go. Welcome to My Movie Story. How are you today?
I'm great, and thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk about all the things.
Excellent. Yeah, so am I. And I think your three films in particular, a couple of them are from big franchises, really well known,
Hmm.
and a little sort of a small independent film starring some familiar faces from bigger movies as well. So, and each very different categories. And we were chatting just before this episode about, what these films mean to you, and that's what we're really going to dive deep into
Hmm.
today. But before we kick it off, Rebecca, tell us a little bit more about yourself. About your coaching, and the
Yeah.
kind of things you help people with. What's sort of your thing all about?
Yeah. So if you look me up or if you hear me in another interview where I'm talking from a coaching perspective, I would say I'm Rebecca Thomas more than a life coach. I say that because I feel like a lot of times we can get hung up on needing, like, should I need somebody to help me, quote unquote, fix my life? And when we use the things that I teach and show you in my coaching, it doesn't just apply to your personal life, it applies to all areas of your life. So that's why I call it more than a life coach. So I am the oldest of seven. I have five younger sisters,
Wow.
hence a lot of feminine energy. So when we coach, and I would have to say, just from my own experience, and then having all these sisters, being around a lot of women in my life, that's one of the reasons I specialize in working with women. But I also, when I come to the coaching table, you get the coach and you get the best friend and you get the big sister. So that's a very interesting dynamic of
Yep.
angles that come at you sometimes, but very much
Definitely.
needed.
Definitely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then as far as who I work with 30 to 50 something women who have scaled professionally, climbed the corporate ladder, might even be pivoting in their lives, and they're getting on the other side of all of the time and energy they've invested in that part of themselves, and taking an audit of their life and realizing that one thing is missing, and that one thing is them. And so
Mm.
I help them get out of their heads, get out of their houses, get out of their businesses, and
Yeah.
get back into their lives.
That's brilliant. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think so needed really to help women realize that they play so many important roles, and sometimes the role
Hmm.
they forget to play is themselves, because
Yeah.
they're being a mom and a wife and a worker and possibly a business owner, and all these other things
Yeah.
that they do. So I think it's great that you help them reclaim that. And
Mhm.
having so many younger sisters, what was that like growing up?
It was interesting. I can
Mm.
say from
Hmm.
experience, I am very glad that I have a boy.
Yep.
But I come from a split family. So a couple of those sisters I didn't actually grow up with, but I'm very close with them now.
Yeah.
But I was also a lot older than
Hmm.
my sisters,
Mm.
and I mean, still am. But when I was younger, that put me in more of a motherly disciplinarian role.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that looked like me not having as much fun and shouldering more responsibility, but also created a really unique respect and dynamic between me and my sisters.
Fantastic.
So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
it just goes to show that even at the time when we're young and we've got all these siblings and we're like fighting and we can't stand each other, like
Uh-huh.
later on in life, we realize how much they shape us and who we become
Yeah.
and all of that. And I guess another thing we've got in common is I'm an only boy and I've got four sisters,
Okay.
three older and one younger. And I guess I had to entertain myself a lot as a kid while my sisters were just off doing their thing,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably where my love of the movie started. It was like that was my escape
Yeah.
from all the crazy going on in the
Okay.
house and everything. So So
Very cool.
and I've only had daughters myself as well. So like
Mm.
I can't seem to escape that. There's always been females around me.
It was meant to be.
It's meant to be, absolutely. Yeah, meant to be. But well, welcome to the show, and great to hear
Yeah,
about your coaching business, and we'll share the
thank
link
you.
underneath the show here for anyone who wants to check out a bit more about Rebecca and what she does. So let's dive into your movies, and like I was saying before, we've got three categories, and for you, we'll start with um, your all-time favorite film, and it's a hard choice because there's so many contenders out there. You do have to
Yeah.
settle on one though. And when you told me what film is your favorite, I'm like, okay, it comes from this big franchise, which is great. It's
Hmm.
also the favorite for a lot of people. And yeah, really keen to talk about your thoughts on how this film
Yeah.
sort of what it did for the franchise, but also why it's your favorite film on its own as well. So yeah, tell us what that film is, Rebecca, and we'll dive right into it.
Yeah. Fast and the Furious 5, hands
Cool.
down.
Cool.
Is all of this really necessary to apprehend two men?
One's a former federal officer, spent 5 years in deep cover. The other one's a professional criminal, escaped prison twice. We find them, we take them as a team, and we bring them back. And above all else, we don't ever, ever let them get in the cars.
Fast and Furious 5. All right, fantastic.
Right.
Where do we start? Where do we start? Okay, cool. I guess we'll start at the beginning.
Hmm.
We Had you seen all the previous films before part 5? Like,
Oh
have you seen
yeah.
them all in order? Yeah,
Several times. Oh yes.
absolutely. Yeah. And so where were you in your life when the first Fast and the Furious film came out, and what was
Oh
your
man.
impression of that?
Talk about blast in the past. I'm not 100% sure exactly what chapter of my life I was in when it came out, just because like I've watched all of them so many different times across the course of my life.
Hmm.
But I would have to say it was probably like when I was bartending at the time I was dating a gearhead, I feel like, because I know that Gone in 60 Seconds was another thing and Gran Turismo was a video game I was playing. So if I
Right.
had to guess, it probably came out somewhere around that time.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, that's like the first thing that came to mind. It was
Mm.
just that was a lot of what was around me at that time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Same here, actually. I was 19 when it came out, and I'd only got my
Hmm.
license earlier that year. And obviously the film had a big influence on street racing and all that sort of stuff. And
Hmm.
I'll be honest, after I saw the film, I got in my car and I might have sped off a little bit. Just and I thought, oh, hang
Right.
on, hang on, hang on. You're not in the movie theater anymore, Brian. But yeah, and it was this little street racing film, Fast and Furious, all the way back in
Hmm.
2001, and now it's become this like cultural phenomenon, and we're
Oh
like
yeah.
10 movies in, and apparently there's more to come and all of that. So
Hmm.
granted, most people watching this have probably seen the Fast and Furious films. We don't need to do like the history and all of that stuff. So
Right.
let's go right into part 5.
Yeah.
Why is part 5 your favorite?
Part 5 is my favorite because like Dom and Letty, I have been
Mm,
invested in them from day one, and just how he plays this role of like the leader, but kind of the father figure of like all the misfit toys and gives them a place. And even though there's so many reasons that they wouldn't be connected in general, like something just brings them together as a family and they
mm,
choose to continue being that family. And then obviously, like Letty was out of the picture for a hot minute in
yeah.
the franchise. So when she comes back, just his like unwavering knowing and yearning to reconnect with her and not have written her off and like at any cost,
Hmm.
that's what's it for me. Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, that's it. That's what it
Yep.
is for me.
Wow, cool. And it is one of, I guess, the most like enduring film relationships we've seen, the Dom and
Hmm.
story. And as you see in other films, like when she goes bad or he goes bad or they're separated or they come back together again, you know, and there's all these different situations, but they're always so loyal to each other, aren't they? Which is really refreshing to see, and really good chemistry. Would you agree? Like those two actors have a pretty good chemistry.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I just love, like, I love them in the movie together, but Michelle Rodriguez's energy, because she's also, you know this, but she's a key player in one of the other movies that I mentioned too.
Yes.
But her energy is just so cool. So just seeing that in the franchise too and in their dynamic just makes it even better for me.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's just, you wouldn't mess with her, would you? She's just like,
no,
she's kick-ass. She really is.
You're right.
She's got that sort of tender side to her as well, but you know, she's like,
oh yeah,
this is a girl you don't mess with. And you know,
yeah.
And one of her earlier films was a film called Girl Fight. Did you ever see
Girl Fight?
Yeah, which is how she really broke onto the scene and probably got her cast as this character. And who would have, you know, I'm sure none of them would have thought after making the first film that, you know, 20 years later they're still playing these characters.
Right.
Yeah,
because at this point it's pretty ridiculous that they're still doing it, but they sure are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm keen to sort of hear your thoughts on you know, I guess the focus of Fast and Furious 5 or Fast 5 or Furious 5. It's got about 10 different names. But essentially it really took the franchise at a point where it was like, okay, we've had the first two street racing films with the and Dom characters separately and together. Then the third one, Tokyo Drift, went off in a different direction. Had some mixed kind of responses, but in hindsight, you can sort of see how it fits into the rest of the saga now. Then the fourth one, they brought back the original cast. And it was like, okay, cool, it's back. And it's like, all right, a fifth one. Are we going to see more street race? Like, what's going to happen? And then the writers and directors made this really, I think, smart decision to make it a heist film. And bring in, obviously, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, who just completely elevated it. So, yeah, so what are your thoughts on, I guess, the focus of the film and what did it do for the other movies in the series?
Right. I mean, I think it, like, them bringing on The Rock seemed very strategic, and they've obviously done that since then as well with other characters too, and how they continue to build out their cast, and even at this point bring back some of the cast that has can't say no right being brought back, but like it just wait, what just happened? So I think it was super smart and like to give it even more credibility because it was still kind of young at that point and to just keep growing. But I also feel like it gave this like Michael Bay-esque energy to it where it's like blow it up, shoot it up as ridiculous and ludicrous as possible, which that's definitely where it's gone. I mean, when you've got a car in space that's basically duct taped together with a rocket engine on the hood, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I can't help but not love it.
Yeah, part 9. Yeah, but yeah, look, it certainly has really gotten out of hand. They're still fun. They're still fun movies, you know. And a lot of people might say, you know, after the 7th one is where they should have ended it. What were your thoughts on the 7th one and how it ended? Did you feel like that was the proper conclusion?
The way that they had to improvise, but then also just like family is important, but when you start bringing kids into the picture, which is hilarious because they were all basically kids when it started, like according to the storyline, they were basically kids, like they were really young. So to see this next generation come in and them wanting to like honor the safety and realize that things needed to be different, I think they did what they needed to with it.
Yeah, that's it. And look, at the end of the day, when the movies are making like $1 billion, why would you stop?
Right. People are still watching them, regardless of whether you love or hate them. They're still watching them.
It's a license to print money. Absolutely. Yeah. And look, we could probably do a whole podcast about the whole Fast and Furious saga, which might come up at some point. But yeah, let's talk a little bit more about part 5. So obviously the big attraction to it was the Dom and Letty relationship. And she's absent, I think, for all of part 5 because she died, so to speak, in part 4. But in this series, no one really dies. They all die and come back to life. And as the end of the 10th one, so I won't spoil it, but
Yes,
showed that
walk of
someone else who
shame, kind
died
of.
has come back as well. It's like, Jesus, just let these people die,
Yeah.
They're not superheroes, but anyway,
I
apparently they
mean,
are superheroes.
but
Apparently they are, I'm sure Dom,
yeah,
I think it's at the point now where Dom will transform into a car. I think it's, gotten to that point, right?
like Transformers-esque.
Yeah, there could be a crossover between Transformers and Back to the
Right.
Future. Who knows? But they could go in any direction. Yeah, but
Hmm.
part five, like it started to really build on that family theme, which we see in all the
Hmm.
later films, and the relationships and everything. But I guess as a standalone film, a lot of people say it's one of the best action films ever made, one of the
Mm.
best films in the series. And what is it? What else about the film draws you to it? Like, what else do you like about it or remember about it?
Yeah, I mean, the movies in general, but especially in five, I just love the dynamic of the team,
Mm,
like the core team. So just
yep,
being able to understand like the underlying humor and the underlying, you know, stories in it and the language and who's always the butt of what joke and who's gonna like I just love that dynamic.
yep. So, do you have a favorite scene from Fast and Furious 5 that comes to mind?
I mean, I feel like it's probably the whole movie in general, just the
Yeah,
feeling of it, Letty
yeah.
coming back, the possibilities of things, like it's
Mhm.
it's all of it.
Yeah, definitely. And they had that little scene at the end credits of part five where Hobbs and his agent they're trying to track down Dom and the gang and all of
Hmm.
that. And they find this picture of Letty. And I think she says
Hmm.
something like, "Do you believe in ghosts?" And we're like, "Oh, hang
Hmm.
on, she's still
Yeah.
alive." And then
Yeah.
yeah, each film then started having these little scenes in the credits. It's like, what's
Yep.
coming next? What's coming next? And they did
Yep.
that at the end of part six as well by introducing, Jason Statham,
Hmm.
who came into
Hmm.
part seven and then just exploded from there. But yeah, yeah. Look, personally, I think for me, past part five is the best sequel in the series.
Hmm.
I think the whole heist film, like you said, the dynamic in the team, the Rio setting, it was not
Hmm.
long before the Olympics, so everyone was kind of watching Brazil and all of that.
Hmm.
It's ridiculous to see two cars dragging a safe around a city and smashing cars left, right, and center. But it
And
was
how you
just,
find out later, like what really happened there.
yeah, that's right. It was all just grand
Yeah.
heist, and
A
yeah, and
decoy.
seeing The Rock, and it was fun, and him and Vin Diesel go,
Yeah.
head to head and all of that. And
Well, and
yeah,
also the female lead in that one, like I loved the way that they brought her in, but also how that ended up evolving in the series as well. Like,
yes,
we were talking earlier about how Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, how, her and Dom, like they're always going to get back together, but it's not, there's been periods where, Dom's been good or bad and Letty's been good or bad, but then in between there were these others relationships, but it doesn't cause this like disconnection. It's like just like their commitment and love for each other is
yeah,
it's so intense that they're going to make it work despite everything, but also
mhm,
completely understand like stuff happens, big
yeah,
stuff happens. So I loved how
absolutely.
they brought her in. And it
Mhm.
was so funny too, because circling into like Gal Gadot being a part of the series and how she ended up being Wonder Woman. I remember having conversations at one point before they had announced who was going to be Wonder Woman, and the woman who played the lead in Fast and Furious 5 was one of the ones that I was like, she could totally be it. And then it
Ah,
ended up being Gal Gadot.
there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That was probably quite a few actresses up for that part. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, she was the one who got it in the end. Yeah, and
Yep.
and I do like how they portray the female characters in these films are portrayed as very strong individuals, and
Mm-hmm.
they have which is good because we see in a lot of Hollywood films that there aren't really enough strong parts for
Mm-hmm.
women, but in this franchise they're definitely strong characters, and they can kick the
Mm-hmm.
guys' butts all around the room, and they
Right.
play a
And
crucial part.
outthink them and out
Yeah,
IT them and
that's right. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
fantastic. Well, such a cool movie, and I'm so glad you brought up Fast and Furious 5. It's definitely right up there as the best in the series, I think. It will be interesting to see where they go over the next two. I think
Oh man.
it's really getting out
Yeah.
of
And I'm
hand.
gonna
But
have to watch, but at this point it's kind of like watching a bad car accident. But I'm so invested in the
that's
characters.
it. We need that closure, don't we? We need to just be like,
Yeah.
all right, get us to the end of the road, and then we'll say
Yeah.
goodbye, and then we can just go back and watch the ones that we like. We don't have to go and
Yeah.
watch the ones
Watch
set in
all of them.
space or underwater. And they haven't had cars underwater yet, so I think maybe we might see that in the next one.
Oh,
You know,
man,
we'll see.
now that you said that.
Yes, the
It's
producers,
like, what
Vin
else
Diesel's
ridiculous
listening.
thing can we do?
Yeah, so if you're listening, Vin Diesel, you can take that idea. Just
Right.
give us some credit. Yeah. All
Oh,
right, cool.
man.
We might move on to your next film, Rebecca, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because this is a big one. It's biggest film of all time by a director who's made the biggest films of all time, and really was, you know, a huge game changer in terms of technology. But you want to talk a little bit more about, I guess, the sort of spiritual aspects of the film, which is really cool. So the film that needs no introduction, but introduce it for us anyway.
Yeah. So that movie is, for me, Avatar.
Fantastic.
Jake, it's crazy here. Quaritch is rolling and there's no stopping him.
We're going up against gunships with bows and arrows.
Well, I guess we better stop him.
They've sent us a message that they can take whatever they want. But we will send them a message that this is our land.
Yeah, well, everyone knows Avatar. I think everyone in the world has seen Avatar. You know, took Titanic's place away as being the highest grossing film of all time from the same director. Funny little story I'll just share before you tell your side of it. When Avengers Endgame came out, which is brilliant, that then outgrossed Avatar. And James Cameron was like, oh, congratulations. And then 2 days later, he re-released Avatar in China just to boost up the ticket sales and reclaim the number one spot of being the highest grossing film of all time. And then Avatar 2 grossed, you know, $2 billion as well. Couldn't quite take over Avengers Endgame, but at least he reclaimed it, you know. So he often says, I don't do this for the money, but I think he likes, you know, being at the top of the
but the money doesn't hurt, right?
No, of course not. You know, $1 billion in your pocket, not too bad. So yeah, big box office earner, obviously. But yeah, like, you want to talk a little bit about, I guess, the world of Pandora and how this changed, you know, your I guess, perspective on the world and reality and stuff. So yeah, tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So first of all, I couldn't tell you how many tears that I've probably shed over that movie and continue to shed over that movie, just because it impacts me so much when I watch it. I remember the first time when I was watching it, it was, I mean, like you said and mentioned, that the technology was just so cutting edge at the time. So it just seemed so alive and so surreal and, you know, so like beyond 3D when you were watching it. And so that time when Sam Worthington, so the main male role, when he got dropped into the jungle, ended up on his own in the middle of the night, doing all the dumbest things you can do, right? Like just trying to fight his way through living through the night, and they had no faith in the fact that he would make it through. And then meeting, you know, the other main female role, who would become his wife. And how she, you know, just had no intention of doing anything for him. He deserves to die because he doesn't belong here. Plus, he's one of them. He's not one of us. And so Awa coming in and first of all giving her the sign, but then also, you know, at the point where they ended up killing an animal. And I remember her saying to him, like, we don't thank for this, because he was telling her, thank you for saving my life. And she was like, we don't thank for this. And I think that was what really started to like hit me, was that's how it should be. You know, we shouldn't just be uselessly and wastefully using the resources that are there for us, because we are all one. And if we understood and respected and honored that, we'd live in a much more beautiful place. But I think another thing that he says in the movie that I really love too, once she takes him back to the village and, she's talking to her parents who happen to be like the elders of the village and the leaders of the village, and eventually get to the point where they decide that he can stay there, but she's going to be the one that has to watch over him, which she hated, but also accepted because AWA.
That's right. Yep.
But I remember at one point further in where, what was it? It was like, you can't fill a full cup. Like that was something they kept talking about too. Yeah. And so they, like through the movie, it was so funny because you could see and continue to see like how they'd always try to put these avatars into this space, but they were the people that were soaking up all the information in their own way. So they came with their own biases with in this like very structured, informed way of interacting versus really learning from and leaning into the culture.
Yes.
And so because he was just this idiot that dropped out of the sky and he didn't have a full cup, he was able to learn their ways and then come to appreciate the people and just how that developed into the natural connections with their planet and between each other and what that looked like. I just was so in love with all of that and feel that like for us.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The film works on so many levels, and I remember back when before it was released, there was a lot of talk online about it for a long time. James Cameron worked on the next big movie and it took 12 years to get it out. And they said he's going to bring back 3D, and everyone's like, 3D, so what? But obviously that immersive 3D, and it was unlike anything any of us had seen before. And it was like, cool. So we're looking at something like a Star Wars action adventure thing on this planet. It's 3D. You're going to feel like you're in the world. And that's kind of what drew people there. But I think what people didn't expect was what you're talking about, how like it had developed this whole philosophy and spirituality around the Na'vi, the aliens, the planet of Pandora. And that I think really is what draws people back to this movie. Would you agree? Like it's the getting absorbed by all of that? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And have you seen the second one, The Way of Water?
A couple of times. Yep.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on the second one?
I like the first one better.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where they go with the third one. The second one, I think part of it was the fact, you talk about the first one taking 12 years. I can't remember how long it took them to release the second one, but it just kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. So I think that was part of what probably stole some of its thunder, was because it did take so long to get prolonged. But at the same time, just watching the storyline was really interesting where they took it. So I don't know if that's kind of an intermittent, like, this is what we're going to do with this till we can get to the other side. But I definitely feel like the first one was more impactful for me. It hit harder.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the story's better, and it really captures the arc known as the hero's journey, which we've spoken about on this podcast before. And it's just watching, Jake, this Marine who's in a wheelchair, who's only there because his twin brother died, and he can go into the avatar body. He's like, all right, I've got my orders, off I go. And then he ends up learning about the spirituality, becoming one of them. And like there's so many standout scenes in this film. So in regards to that aspect, the connection to the AWA and the spirituality, do you have a favorite scene or image from the film that really captures that? Or if there's a few, you can mention more.
I was gonna say, I definitely really always remember like when she first showed him the tree of Awa and tapping into that and being able to actually like hear what was going on there. So it wasn't so much we're just talking about it, and obviously there's a light alluding from this, but also like being able to actually hear it and feel it. And so I think that part really stood out. And then another part that really stood out was when he knew what his role was and what his place was, and refused to sidestep that, despite the fact that he had caused so much betrayal and mistrust. And Nateri was furious at him and rejected him and everything else, but still knew that this was something that he had to do, and thought through like, what do I have to do this? And being able to harness that creature and come down and actually show them in a way that they respected that this was how it was meant to play out, and he
Yeah.
was there to lead them, and he was actually for them. I think that's another piece that really sticks out for me too, because
Yeah.
it brought them all back together.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that really speaks out to me is like when they got to the point where they were fighting with, you know, the military presence and
Yep.
being attacked, and you know, whispering these prayers to Awa, and it felt hopeless, but then the magic just came through and the miracle came through. Like
Yeah.
she heard us
That's right.
and sent every power that she could in order to support their efforts, in order to regain that balance. So that's the
Yeah.
other thing that was just really beautiful to me.
Yeah, and all the animals just show up, and at the,
Yep.
at the 11th hour,
Yep.
Natiri's screaming, "Awa has heard you," and then
Yep.
and then the Marines don't
Yep.
stand a chance. Like they just rock up, and it's just get their asses kicked.
Yeah.
And then it's just Quaritch, the main colonel, and you know, Jake in the woods. Yeah, just brilliant, just brilliant. So many standout scenes, and it's definitely, you know, one of my favorite films as well. And I'm with you. I preferred the first one over the second one as well. I think the second one was visually stunning, like especially the underwater scene. That was just like mind blowing. And yeah, it did take a long time for the second one to come out. So I think you're right. It had a bit of its thunder stolen, but he's made parts 2, 3, 4, and I think even 5. They're all been made together, and the next one's going to be released end of next year. Which rumor has it it's going to show the this other side of Pandora, these other Na'vi who are actually bad guys, basically. So there's going to be like this Na'vi civil war. Yeah.
Okay.
And I was reading this article about the films, and my kind of conclusion is that each film in the series addresses, you know, the different elements or the different stages of life. So the first film was about fire, because it's about, you know, the military scorching the earth and trying to take it, everything. The second one was about water, and then you'll have, I think there's one that's going to focus on the birds and the flying, and then there's one that's going to focus on Pandora's underground, and the roots that go down into the core of the planet. And so we're going to really, in the future films, really explore other aspects of the planet, which is exciting. So it'll be curious to see where they take it. And we don't have to wait another 13 years for the next one now.
Right, thank goodness. I'd still watch it, but
yeah, we only have to wait to the end of 2024, and then I think another 2 years, and yeah, we should be good. But yeah, gosh, it's such a big film, you know. There's obviously so much we can take out of it and all of that. But yeah, I really like, you know, your thoughts on it around that spirituality, and yeah, just I guess just to wrap up on that note, what lessons do you think we can take from Avatar and to our world, and maybe the way we see the world? How does it help us?
The biggest thing I see in that is just recognizing like all is one. Like whether we realize the smallest action that we take, or the smallest thought that we think, or how we treat ourselves or treat other people, or how we interact with our surroundings and with our environment, like it's all connected. And the more that we can honor that and lead from a place of that, the better off we'll all be.
Yeah. Beautiful. I like that. Yeah. I'm going to go watch Avatar now with a very different perspective. So thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Really cool. Yeah, really cool. Awesome. Well, we've got one more film to talk about, and for anyone watching, if you know you're hungry, we're going to make you even more hungry right now. Please don't walk away and make a snack. Just let this film you know, just indulge your senses first. But anyway,
marinate.
Enough from me. Tell us, Rebecca, what is this film everyone should see?
Yeah, the film that everybody should see, and one that I often suggest to my clients, is The Chef.
You're gonna laugh.
Tony, Carl's got a taco truck.
For real?
I was so jealous when I heard your voice. I was like, that's what I want to do.
I get to touch people's lives with what I do, and I love it. And I want to share this with you.
You ever try andouille sausage?
No.
It's spicy. You like spicy?
No.
It's not so spicy. Come on.
Fantastic. Yep. Written and directed by Jon Favreau,
Yep.
who many people might not recognize the name, but he directed the first two Iron Man films. He played Happy in Marvel, Tony Stark's bodyguard, but also had a bit of a career back in the 90s with movies like Swingers and Very Bad Things. And yeah, he's a really talented guy, writer, director, actor. And this film is a love affair of food. So tell us all about it. Tell us about this film.
Yeah.
Why do you love it? Like, what's it all about?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember too, like where I was the first time I watched it. And it was within the last few years. So it's a newer to me film, even though I think it's a little bit older, not a
Yeah,
lot older, but a little
2014
bit.
it came out, 2014.
Okay, yeah. So it's been around for a while. And
Yeah.
I stumbled on it one night. I can almost guarantee you that the thing that drew me to it was the cast, because so many of the cast are from the Marvel universe, and I'm a big Marvel fan, so I can almost guarantee that was what originally attracted me to the movie. But then when I started watching it, it was this what I see with my clients was what I see in my clients, and what I see as possible for my clients was exactly what was portrayed in this movie. So I have this thing I'm really passionate about, and I start out and I put my heart and soul into it, and I love it, and it's everything for me. But little by little, I start listening to like either the inner voice that chips away from me, or to these exterior voices that are telling me how I should have to do things or how I should do things. And I start compromising pieces of myself. And as I do that, I lose my passion. I lose my energy. I don't shine. I start to not trust myself because I'm listening to everybody else. And even though I still have these nudges of what I should do for me, like for what's best for me and how I do this, I ignore that because I feel like I have to fit in somebody's box, or, check off a box for somebody else.
Yeah.
But then to see this rebirthing of re-becoming himself because of that whole process, like that's the most beautiful part of the movie for me.
Yep.
So it shows everything from the beginning to the end of that process of being your most authentic self.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. His journey from being this high-strung, stressed out chef who's obviously really good at what he does, but is battling with the restaurant owner versus the food he wants to cook. He's got a son that he barely knows. His ex-wife, who's actually not too bitter with him, they've still got a pretty good relationship. She's clearly moved on. And this critic bashes his food, criticizes the restaurant, he loses it, and he's out on his own. And it's like, what do I do? And like you said, it is about sort of starting from scratch and sort of going back to your roots a little bit. So yeah, in terms of like, aside from all the beautiful food that gets cooked, and like I was watching this and my mouth was just salivating. I'm like, oh, I'm so hungry.
Yep.
It was late at night when I watched it, and I was like, I can't go and make like this beautiful sandwich right now. Are we going to bed in half an hour? So I had to settle with crackers and cheese, but still, I'll watch it and just be like, I want to cook all the food in this film. It really grabs you in that way, and how beautiful the food looks. You can taste it by watching the movie, But yeah, just a little bit more about his journey, and I guess what stages does he sort of go through, and what are maybe some of the moments that force him to change? Like, what do you think, aside from the cooking and all that? Like, what's happening for this guy and in his journey?
Man.
Yeah,
it's like this reconciling his lost identity with having to figure out who he is now on his own as an individual, as a father, as a chef. So I think that's like where it all starts. Like once he pisses off the restaurant owner, he doesn't do what he doesn't trust himself and do what he knows he should do. And he doesn't honor the very thing that got him to the status that he had been before that, which was very elite for his industry. So he ignores all that, pisses off the restaurant owner, and then goes on to like basically be on his own. So he's got to not only figure out who he is, but also figure out how he's gonna do the next thing. Like, he's got to get out of his own way, basically, because he's also dealing with this like shame of failing, right?
Yep.
Supposedly he failed, but then also knowing what he should have done for himself to begin with.
Yeah.
And then also trying to pair that with being a parent, which is so interesting. So it brings in the whole aspect of like quality time and interaction
Yes.
and interpersonal relationships.
Yep.
But then also seeing that he very much has this amazing relationship with his ex-wife, and she's rooting for him, and probably part of the reason she fell out of love with him was because he became somebody he wasn't. Like that passion and that energy got lost as he compromised his identity. So I love seeing all that. And then on the other side of it, just people around him encouraging him and giving him these little breadcrumbs that help lead him back to himself, but him learning to enjoy again,
Yep.
like plugging into the things that really brought him happiness and fulfillment, and allow him to also not only feel inspired, but inspire the people around him, including his son, because then his son is seeing his dad becoming, right? Like being re-energized and repassioned by all of these things. And not only can you respect somebody in that position, but then you see it for yourself too, and just how that brings them together.
Yeah. Beautifully put. Yeah, I think it's a great journey of, and a reminder that, like, sometimes when we throw ourselves into work and focus on work, that we can neglect other things, relationships and our health and all of that. And you can see that he's just been living and breathing food for so long, and his son wants to spend time with him. So like he does that when he knows how, is through food and through cooking. And the son's kind of like, oh, okay, I guess, this is the only way I can hang out with my dad.
Right.
And then the son sort of steps up and is like, okay, well, at least I'm getting to spend time with you now, so I'm going to help you. And he does all the social media stuff for him and helps the food truck really take off.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I must say the scenes with them on the road, and John Leguizamo as well, great actor.
He's so much fun in that
the best,
film.
isn't he?
I mean, he
Love
is
that
in
guy.
general, but in that film, yes.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's so likable. And he just always pops up in these random films, he's great. But yeah, the food truck scenes were fantastic, and like you just feel like you're there with them in the truck as they're making all this food and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just such a feel-good movie, and and it's never like kind of preachy, it's never sappy or corny. Like the chemistry is great, the acting's great.
Relatable.
Yeah, very relatable. Yeah, we've all, as parents,
Yeah.
we can all understand what it's like when we get caught up in work and we try to be the best we can be in our job. I'm like, well, I need to be spending more time with this person or that person. But it's like, how can I maybe use what I'm good at, my skills, to improve the relationships with people, and he manages to do that. And it's really about him and his son kind of reconnecting and stuff. Yeah. And do you have a particular scene or moment from the film that you like the best?
I think there's so many in that film. It's hard to choose, but I think like one of the biggest ones was like as his son was taking those second clips every single day.
Yep.
And his dad had no idea. Like he didn't even know how to, what did he call it? He didn't call it a tweet, but like he didn't even know how to tweet.
Yeah, that's
Screwed that all up. So technology was obviously not his thing, but I think, as his son was talking about that he was making these little micro moments and piecing them all together, like seeing them all together was just so beautiful because it represented everything that John Leguizamo, or not John, Jon Favreau was in that movie, but then also like all of the people around him that were a part of that too. So his son and John Leguizamo and the food truck travel and like going to the market and just all those like those moments that we have in our everyday lives that we sometimes ignore. And it was literally just compiled together. And then all of a sudden he understood, like he could understand it at that point, like what it was all about.
Yeah, that was a really beautiful moment where he finally gets home back to his crappy little apartment, watches the video, and he's like, oh, this is what life's all about,
Yeah.
And then he calls up his son and he's like, yeah, all right, you can work with me. And the son's just wrapped, and then it's really great.
Over the moon. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I'd seen that online before, where people make those little 1-second videos of their day for 30 days. I thought, maybe I could do that, but then I realized, well, most days I'm just sitting at my laptop, so it would just be like 30 little seconds.
Do a little more living, Brian.
Typing, maybe my head was tilted that way. Oh, I moved the mouse in that video. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm like, hang on, maybe I should get out there a little bit more. But at the moment, I'm just
Yeah.
chained to my laptop, but that's how it is. But yeah, that was a
Yeah.
really lovely scene, I thought. And yeah, you really see him become a father through the son's scenes with his son, which is great. And then it has the lovely happy ending where they're all reunited. The food critic, does
Right.
good for him. And then
Yeah.
when it ended, I was just like, oh, that was great. What a feel good
Uh-huh.
film. I'm gonna go make a sandwich now. Like, but
Right.
that was my thought, but I couldn't because it was like midnight. I'm like, I better go to bed.
Right.
I'm pretty sure I dreamed
Yeah.
about food last night after watching that film.
Hmm.
But
Yeah. And
absolutely.
another thing with that movie too that I love so much about it is just like him reclaiming his identity,
Mhm.
because like we can get lost in who we think we should be or just the day-to-day mundaneness. And
Yeah.
so him being able to reclaim that. But then one of the reasons I love sharing it with my clients is because it shows like the full journey, right? The full process, everything that probably all of us have been through can relate to, but then also how when we show up as the most authentic versions of ourselves,
Mm.
sometimes that is the very thing that actually creates the opportunity, because somehow we have it in our mind it's supposed to look this way, but when you keep it right here you miss out all the magic that's out here. And so that I
Yeah.
love how it wraps that up in a bow too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I can imagine for you, like with your coaching and helping the women you help and seeing the results,
Hmm.
that's really like fulfilling for you, and that's kind of
Hmm.
where you get a lot of your zest and energy from.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when you
Yeah.
see what you do helps other people and makes other people
Hmm.
happy, it's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
and watching it kind of reminded me, like, recently I've done this podcast and it's been on my mind for years and years, and to finally fully engage myself in it and talk about movies, which I've never done
Hmm.
to this extent before. It's
Yeah.
really lifted my mood and my energy levels,
Hmm.
and it's the thing I love talking about the most. So it was a kind of a nice reminder in that film that to just go for the thing that you love doing.
Hmm.
Even if it's not necessarily a massive career for you, or even if it doesn't make
Right.
sense to everybody else, just do what you love, right?
Stay true. Hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. For sure. Cool. Such a great message in that film. And yeah, most people have seen Avatar and Fast and Furious 5. Not many people might have
Hmm.
seen Chef, but if you haven't, watch it.
They should.
Absolutely. And
And I don't use that word often, but they should.
you will get hungry. I'm just warning you guys.
Yes.
Yes. Have some snacks while you're watching the film.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. So just in wrapping up, Rebecca, I like to sort of throw this question out to every guest is around what would you like to see more of in the movies? I think at the time of this podcast,
Mm.
movies are sort of at an interesting turning point. I think, competing with TV and streaming and
Yeah.
getting people back into theaters after COVID and stuff. And lots of different films aren't quite working. Others, it's a real
Hmm.
transitional time. So what would you like to see in the future of movies? Or what are you hoping to see more of? Anything along those lines?
I mean, always normalizing emotions,
Mm,
just like our day to day, every day. It doesn't need to be fixed. It doesn't need to be like, let me feel my emotions and let's like discover the language around emotions so we can better communicate those things, and understand like who we are and why we're experiencing what we are. But just more empowerment too. Like you can be in the struggle and not have this fairy tale ending, but be the hero of your own story. So, but in a very like just day to day way, not this Herculean over the top, but like just circling back to ourselves and empowering ourselves. Like I would just love to see more of that.
absolutely. Yeah. More movies like Chef, right? Yeah. More little
Right, exactly.
more little movies like that. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Take the chef
But not a
formula
part
and
two. Like we got to keep it
yeah.
original.
That's right. Yeah, no more sequels, more original stuff. And yeah, I think that's the power of movies is like, we all, and what this podcast is all about is like we can all connect to a movie. And I think we haven't
Hmm.
had a lot of movies made like that in recent years that are really
Mm.
life affirming and help us identify who we are and stuff. And they've kind of
Yeah.
gone off in a different direction. But yeah,
Hmm.
I think that's a great suggestion. Like more of that sort of empowering sort of stuff would be great. So
Mm.
yeah, we'll stay tuned and hopefully we'll see more films like that in the future,
Right.
which would be terrific. So just in wrapping up, any other honorable mentions with movies, like other ones maybe you thought about talking about today or that you love?
I love Joy
Oh, yep.
with Jennifer Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like you're the own hero of your story. So, and just as an entrepreneur and refusing to give up and everything that said that you shouldn't have accomplished what you did, but still doing that and then paying it forward. That's a big one. And I would have to say another big one is Meet Joe Black.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
another favorite of mine. That one, I back in the day did not feel my feelings very well, and that was actually one of my hacks for feeling my feelings, was to turn that on and just let the tears drop, but also like be so completely inspired.
Yeah.
And then
Great
the
film.
Green Mile is another big one for me too.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, I loved Michael Clark Duncan, and that whole movie was just amazing for me.
Absolutely. So emotional. So emotional. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen Joy yet, so I'll have to check that out. But Meet
Mm-hmm.
Joe Black is one of my favorites as well. I just love the music in that film. It's got one of the best scores ever, I think. But brilliant, brilliant. So many movies to watch and not enough time.
Yeah.
But
right.
but thanks, Rebecca. Been great having you on My Movie Story. Thank you for sharing your films and your stories behind them. And it's been great chatting to you. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. I loved being here and having all the conversations and talking about all the movies. Thanks, Brian.
Awesome. Take care.
You too.